We got some really good stuff and not so good stuff to talk about with our reviews.
Yes.
Uh,
Um, and we're going to start with the thing that probably would have been more algorithm friendly to talk about last week, but it seems like discussion of this has largely died very
yeah.
quickly. We've got Scott Pilgrim Takes Off. Now, you might say, DB, why did you pick a sample image of the show that does not actually feature the title character Scott Pilgrim?
Hmm. Why is that, DV? Hmm.
Yeah. All right. So let's kind of get this out of the way. This review is going to have spoilers because it is hard to discuss this show in a way that does not actually spoil the premise.
Right.
Um, because the phrase online about this is that it is another bait and switch. Bait and switch. There we go. Now I'm in the
Quote
camera.
unquote. Quote unquote. Yes.
Bait and switch. What it really is an alternate telling that they really did not. Yeah, they pulled another He-Man. They were not
Yeah.
upfront and honest about what the show actually was.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. The when you when we actually did the trailer reaction to
Mhm.
this, and it was basically just the first episode that was in the clips from the first episode was in that trailer.
Yeah, and the first episode looks like it's a straightforward adaptation of the Scott Pilgrim versus the World comic book.
Right. And as you watch that episode, you get to the end where the first of Ramona's evil exes shows up.
Matt, what's his name?
Matt, right? Matt Patel.
That's it.
Yeah, and he's about to, he goes in to fight Scott Pilgrim, and then just as and this happens, it appears that Scott Pilgrim is killed.
Yes, a bunch of coins fly around. Yeah,
Yeah.
which in the video gamey world of Scott Pilgrim means death.
Yes. And uh, so now that Scott Pilgrim is dead, the story is just completely different now. It focuses on Ramona, and she figures out that she's trying to figure out. She puts two and two together that uh, that Scott didn't actually die. That he got pulled
Mhm.
through a vegan portal.
Yeah, which it occurs to me, boy, this so on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate this show's ability to be understandable by somebody who had not read the comic or watched the movie?
uh, Two and a half, maybe three.
Yeah. So it occurs to me, we just launched into it assuming people would know what it was. Let's just take a step back here. The
Yes.
original Scott Pilgrim versus the World was a series of black and white comics that were later colorized, released by a gentleman named Brian Lee O'Malley over at Oni Press, I believe. Uh, he the series is basically the series is one of the last great American successes in comic books.
Mm.
Like it was really big in the 2000s. There's even a song about called Ramona Flowers destroyed an entire generation of women
Yes.
to kind of talk about the influence of, well, jokingly talking about or maybe not so jokingly talking about the influence of the show
Yeah,
or,
yeah,
or the comic. The
yeah,
movie came out. The movie was a modest, well, it was a flop, but it's one of those flops that has a cult following. So
hmm
it's probably broken even in the long run.
yeah, yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
but
That movie had a lot of kind of big actors now that were
you, a lot of people who are superheroes. Like
yeah,
some of the actors went on to be things in the CW for DC. Uh,
yeah.
Brie Larson is a character. Chris Evans is a
I guess,
character. The guy who was in Superman 2006 was the character.
yeah,
Brandon
yeah.
Routh was it?
Brandon Routh, yeah.
Routh, that's it.
Um,
But yeah, so the basic premise is it's basically a video game plot starring a directionless young slacker named Scott.
right.
He is dating a high schooler, which everybody you know, calls him out about, rightfully so, as he is 23.
Yes.
And while he is dating this high schooler, Knives, who is on the left there,
Mm.
he meets this indie girl named Ramona Flowers, and he decides to date her. And basically, she has a bunch of evil exes who she dumped and were butthurt about it. And anybody who tries to date her must go through the gauntlet of the 7 evil exes.
Yes. And in like a video game plot, each evil X is a varying, different higher level of difficulty.
Right, right. Ending with Gideon,
Right.
um, uh, who is the mastermind of the whole thing. Now, my understanding is that since the comic and the movie came out, Brian Lee O'Malley got divorced from his wife, and that might have influenced some of the creative decisions that they allowed for this show.
Uh,
Because it is not, again, it is not focused on Scott in any way, except Scott is almost like the damsel in distress to an extent, because
yeah.
like he does not really contribute to the plot significantly.
No, he doesn't. He just kind of he's more of the plot device. Yeah.
Right. It's like Ramona has to investigate why Scott disappeared.
Yeah.
Uh, uh,
Yeah.
and then so that's kind of like that's the first level of spoiler, where it's basically, hey, this is not a straightforward adaptation of it. That's why it has a different name.
Yeah.
Uh, there is a second season apparently they've talked about working on, though. I'll be curious if that actually gets greenlit if it hasn't been officially, because again, it's like I did not see it in the trending on Netflix any of the times I was watching it.
Yeah. Yeah, and Netflix is very wishy-washy when it comes to renewing their shows. Sometimes they'll say, "Oh yeah, we're bringing it back," and then like a week or two later, they'll change their mind and cancel it.
Oh, we didn't get the numbers we were after. Sorry.
Right? Yeah. Cowboy Bebop.
Yes. But so before we get into like the second layer of spoilers, which would be like actually talking about the ending or things like that,
Yeah.
let's talk about this from like a production level.
Yeah.
So they actually got the original cast from the movies to come back to voice the characters.
Yes.
Um, so I there were some of them who came off a little bit stilted, which I don't necessarily fault them for, because um, voice acting and physical acting are different skills.
Hmm.
I would say that highlights are Ramona's actress, whose name escapes me, but she did a
Um,
good job.
Elizabeth Winstead.
That's right.
She most recently she played Hera Syndulla in Ahsoka.
Oh,
Yeah.
um, well, then this is probably the the better performance. um, the other one that really stood out to me as a good performance was actually Brie Larson as the girl in the middle there, who was just kind of an awful,
That
awful
was
person.
that's Aubrey Plaza.
Is that Aubrey Plaza's character?
That's yeah,
No, wait,
that's
no,
Aubrey
no, wait, no,
Plaza.
no. You're right. Aubrey
Yeah.
Plaza's character was. I actually kind of thought she was one of the ones who was maybe slightly stilted compared to normal. I'm
Mhm.
thinking of Envy
Envy.
Adams, who was
Yeah.
Brie Larson's character.
Right. Yeah.
She did a great job of just like hamming it up as this angry Valley girl.
Yeah. Well, that's a role she was born to play.
Uh, uh, I'm gonna like so honestly, like as much of a plank of wood as she is as Captain Marvel,
Hmm.
she can act. It's just that that character had nothing to sink into. I say if and when they make a Barbie sequel, Brie Larson should be the villain. Like, it would be awesome.
Yeah.
Eh,
Yes.
Um, as far as the animation goes, this is a pretty faithful redoing of the or adaptation of the comic book style,
Hmm.
which has its ups and downs. The characters are kind of simplistic looking. It's kind of a chibi-ish style.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
What was the show with the anime that you? You said it
Oh,
was kind of like,
panty and stocking with garter belt.
yeah.
It, it's like a version of that but with smoother animation. For those who don't know, Panty and Stocking was Gynax Studios basically being inspired by things like Powerpuff Girls and really crass American adult cartoons to just make something over the top and edgy with cheap animation.
Yeah.
Um, but like the animation itself was mostly good where it needed to be. The fight scenes they had were pretty inventive,
Mhm.
and they had a lot of interesting angles to them. Uh, so the like just interesting camera angles, interesting shots, interesting set pieces. Um, so from like a production standpoint, no real issues. Um, the okay, so I think we're ready for that second layer of spoilers. So
Yes.
if you're you know what, I like that. I like the Scott Pilgrim just fine. I'm cool with having a couple of little spoilers. I'm going in knowing it's a Ramona Flowers show. Stop now, go watch it, and hopefully you enjoy yourself.
Yeah.
For those of you who go, so, okay, what's the deal here? What's going on?
Yeah.
Um, Scott Pilgrim pulled off a rare twofer here. He is both the damsel in distress and the villain.
Yeah. Yeah. So, what happens is, in the future, which is what was it, like
20 years, I think. He was
20
like
years? Yeah.
late 30s.
Yeah. So, it'd probably be, I don't know, maybe like a few years from now for us, even though the technology didn't really match up.
Oh,
But
that's right. Yeah, Scott Pilgrim takes place in the early 2000s, so or mid
oh yeah,
2000s. So
yeah,
technically, he would be right around now. But they have like hover bus and
yeah, yeah. um, but uh, but so Scott Pilgrim in the future, he basically concocts this scheme with the help of two of Ramona's evil exes who are twins. They're in a a band together in the future. That's, they sing a lot of J-pop songs.
to dozens of views on YouTube. Can't imagine what that's like.
Yeah. Oh. Uh, yeah. But um, but yeah. So he concocts this whole scheme with the twins, and they have the robot who is a vegan robot. I don't know how that works. Yeah.
I mean, technically, he has never eaten meat, which in the world of Scott Pilgrim gives you superpowers.
Yeah, yeah. So the robot makes the vegan portal and brings Scott to the future, and old Scott is doing that because he's trying to keep his younger self from marrying Ramona because they end up getting divorced.
Right. Which actually turned out to be a bit of an exaggeration because she said she needed space, and he interpreted that as flake out.
Right? Yeah.
And man,
Yeah.
the ending scene to this,
Were they trying to go for like a Dragon Ball type ending?
yeah, yeah, and basically the ending is that future Ramona and present Ramona merge. Their hyper Ramona powers let them defeat the future Scott Pilgrim, who has trained himself into basically a old grizzled version of Ryu from Street Fighters, who can beat everybody easily.
Yeah.
And yeah, then
Yeah.
they have a teaser for a second season.
Yeah.
If I don't sound excited as I describe this, it's because the show has the show has good qualities to it.
Mm.
I would say like a lot of the actual episodes are pretty interesting.
Yeah, they kind of some of the jokes I thought were pretty good. I mean, I did like the whole thing with Chris Evans, was it Lucas Lee, when he and hey D Rhino, good to see you. Um,
Sounding like this in every scene.
Something like this in every scene, yeah. And then he and Gideon, or Gideon, become good friends, and then you find out Gideon's real name is Gordon Goose.
Because of course, half of Canada is named Gordon. or
Right.
Gordy.
Yeah. And then the uh, young Neil cracked me up.
Yeah, he's just a complete idiot.
Yeah. He's,
Um, that's what I would say the strength of this show is that you get to it develops characters who, like in Scott's story, they were obstacles who were killed off,
mhm,
or they were minor characters who didn't get to do much. Um, where in this one they get a lot of focus. Like you learn more about most of the evil X's, except funnily enough, the twins who in the movie were also the least developed evil X's.
yeah.
It's like the screenwriter of this, who's not Brian Lee O'Malley, it's somebody else who came in to do it.
Yeah.
Like looked at what he had available for the twins and just said, "They are my plot device. Cool. Moving
Yeah.
on."
Yeah. Yeah. Whatever.
Yeah.
um. Yeah.
So then, as far as uh, hmm, uh, now, as far as things I don't really care for, the show still didn't really make me love Ramona. Like I don't like it kind of fleshes her out a little bit. You get to see her be like a little bit sorry for how she treated her exes in the past,
Yeah.
but the show is, the show is kind of in love with her. Like it assumes that you're into Ramona or interested in
Yeah.
Ramona.
Yeah. And I thought most Scott Pilgrim fans like preferred knives.
That that's the overall impression I got. And
Yeah.
like with the premise of Scott Pilgrim dying, and like if you actually committed to the bit and had Scott die, if I'd been given that prompt, I would have gone, oh, well, Knives is the focus character, and she's on a revenge quest, which is about the futility of revenge and her realizing that Scott wasn't that great to start with.
Which probably would have made for a more interesting show.
Yeah. Like this wasn't bad, but it kind of like as good as the performance was for Ramona, it's still just not my favorite character.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
the the other thing about it is by the nature of it being a time travel alternate universe plot, it does kind of end up replacing the original Scott Pilgrim versus the World.
Yeah. Except for when future Ramona goes back and writes the screenplay for young Neil, and then they're making the movie of it. They're
Yeah,
trying to make the movie of it.
that was weird and meta. Like that was,
Yeah.
uh, um, but yeah. So the thing is, like Scott Pilgrim is always a series I've been very lukewarm on. I liked the movie well enough. I've seen it a couple of times. The comic book I actually found kind of a slog to get through,
Mm,
just because, well, Scott and Ramona are tiresome, toxic people, and the storyline is about them getting better. But it just wasn't that interesting moment to me.
yeah. Yeah.
That's the other thing is that this Scott basically doesn't get to achieve anything. He basically shows up again. They confront the evil exes. Then Scott Pilgrim from the future shows up, beats everybody up, and then Ramona solves the day.
Yeah. Which, yeah. Which again, if you like Ramona, that's great. But like,
Right. And the thing is that I watched an episode of Night's Watch over on Shad's channel where they
yeah.
had one of his regulars on there who was apparently a Scott Pilgrim super fan.
Okay.
Like he had finally convinced his wife to watch the show, and when they got to the end of the first episode and she realized it was different, like she kind of saw that as, well, my contract is fulfilled. I don't have to watch this anymore.
Yeah.
And he talked about looking at his shelf and all the collection of comics and the video game and stuff on there, and being very sad to realize he was probably never going to get the actual adaptation of the show he loved in his lifetime.
Yeah. Mm,
Uh, so that was one fan who was very let down by this. Um, Now I've seen other people. The thing is, like, I don't take it seriously on Twitter when people talk about enjoying things. I'm sorry, I just can't. There's enough bots on there and things like that that you can't necessarily take it as an actual endorsement.
yeah.
which
Yeah.
is mostly where I saw people talking good things about it. Maybe it's the YouTube algorithm. Maybe it's because the YouTube algorithm likes taking hot takes and piss takes and other takes. Uh, I'm not seeing a lot of love for this, except for Call Me Chado.
Yeah, he's the only one I've seen so far that has enjoyed the show.
Yeah, which fair enough.
Mm.
I would say, but like the thing is that the thing with Scott Pilgrim is that he's God. This sounds pathetic to say. He's kind of the Luke Skywalker of a certain generation of young men.
Yeah. Uh,
Uh, Maybe not as extreme, but basically he is a character who I've met more than one Scott Pilgrim in my time.
I have too. Yeah.
Like a young directionless jerk who just sponges off the world and contributes nothing. And it's about him realizing his flaws and becoming a better person.
Mhm.
Which I can see where that's a story that would be meaningful to a lot of 20 somethings.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So having that yanked away and given to Ramona, and that's the new continuity where Scott doesn't even get to fight the evil X's.
Yeah.
Oof, that,
Oof. Yeah.
yeah. And also the evil X's all survive, so I guess they're around for the second season. Though they contribute all absolutely nothing to the end fight with old Scott Pilgrim
No, they just get their butts kicked. Yeah.
instantly. So
Yeah.
it's like, okay, cool.
And Ninja, good to see you, man. And he asks, "Is it wrong for me to actually like the twist of the series? It makes me more interested."
No,
No.
like I'm talking about if you're actually a fan of the original material to a large extent, you're going to be this could be crushing.
Hmm.
Um, if you're like me and you're lukewarm, it's like, okay, I can kind of see what you're doing there. But then I always feel sympathy for fans of things that get a weird adaptation.
Yeah, I do too. Yeah.
It- like the example that was hammered into me is like, what if you were the biggest Green Hornet fan in the world, and your one swing at the bat was the Seth Rogen version?
Yeah, or or the aforementioned He-Man, not just with the Netflix show, but also the live action movie with Dolph Lundgren.
Yeah, He-Man has now had two swings at the bat of a proper media adaptation. I mean, I guess they got that 2000s cartoon show that people really liked, but
Yeah, 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 but yeah, oof.
but
Mm.
if this sounds interesting to you, then it is a it is a good enough watch.
Yeah,
There were moments
yeah,
that annoyed me, moments that didn't annoy me. I would put my enjoyment at like a 7 out of 10.
yeah. I give it a 6. Yeah, it
Yeah.
is what it is. Yeah.
Uh, I will say though, they I kind of brushed by this when we were talking about the X's getting some development, and I would never have thought that I wanted more of the first Evil X, Matt Patel. There's a reason I remember his name when I'm off with names. He's great in this show,
Yeah, yeah,
so good on him. I really liked
yeah,
that him surviving added a lot to the show. So
yeah, yeah, and yeah, when he takes over Gideon's company and everything. Yeah. And it says they also had a children's show that was released alongside. Oh yeah, I remember seeing that. And He-Man was a real hero.
eh, I almost wonder how it would have. So what's interesting is that on Netflix they do actually have Scott Pilgrim versus the World, the movie,
Mm.
available. So technically, you could watch that, then watch this if you're unfamiliar with it. This does seem like more of a sequel to the movie than the comics.
Yeah, yeah, I think so too. Yeah, I've only watched the movie once. I may have to go back and watch it again.
The one thing I thought, like the character who is my bellwether for what version of things you're adapting, is the vegan guy,
Yeah,
uh, because in the comic he was very full of himself. He was very conceited, but he seemed like he was somewhat clever.
yeah,
In the movie, he was a complete dumbass. And this seems to follow that characterization more.
yeah. I just like the whole thing in the movie where he's like, yes, he's vegan, which means he's better than you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So it's a silly show still. It has some ups and downs. I didn't love it,
yeah,
but
same here.
if you did, I can kind of squint and see why.
Yeah. Although, like you, I was very annoyed by the animation sequence of Ramona changing her hair every episode.
Yeah, every episode Ramona changed her hair color because that's one of her character traits from the comic, and it was the same animation every time.
Yeah, just with different hair color.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah.